The opinions expressed on the Custody Queen Show are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for personal, professional legal advice. The persons discussed are fictional and not based on actual clients.
Thought it was love, had kids in between. You can count on us, we're the Custody Queens. Yeah, you can count on us, we're the Custody Queens.
All right, everyone. Happy Saturday. Kristen loves hearing me say that. Thank you for another episode of Custody Queens on Air. We are so excited to be back again. And this week we have a very special guest who is both our friend and colleague, David Ruegg. Welcome to the show, David.
Good to be here.
Whoop,
Thanks for having me.
So David is going to get into QDROs, and I know a lot of you are probably listening in the car or at home going, what the F is that? And we are going to answer that question for you and also explain to you today why that is so important to the family law and divorce process and why it's really important to educate yourself on that very, very important subject. It's so important that us family law attorneys, me and Kristen, don't really ever deal with it. We just call our friend David and say, hey, help us out. So we'll get into that today. But before we do, we're going to go ahead and start off with an icebreaker, and I'm going to let Kristen say that.
All right. So, David, this can be super profound or it can be super funny. But this is a good one. It's an oldie but a goodie. And I love just kind of bringing it up every couple of years because who we are now is definitely not who we were 20 years ago. So if you could tell your younger self one thing for like where you're at now, like what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I probably would not be an attorney. I would do something else, which I think is kind of funny because I've been an attorney for a long time. But I think I would do something in computers instead. So I think I would say that my day job can be a little bit repetitive. It's very profitable. I like the money, but sometimes I get a little bored repeating myself over and over again. So maybe a different career.
That's fair. So you don't think you have 4 upcoming attorney kids?
Well, we'll see. You know, if I can hand the business off to one of them and just kind of slip in, why not?
Yeah. There you go.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that most attorneys would probably say that to their younger self, or at least don't be so quick to like decide your future at 20 years old.
I think one of the funniest things about, when you go like interview people of like what you want to do with your career, and you go, interview a doctor, or you go interview an engineer, or some other person that seems happy in their job, they all say, oh yeah, great career, blah, blah, blah. Lawyers, it seems like it's one of the only professions that, like, if I have a younger person coming to me and they say, should I go to law school? I say, no, please pick something else. Do something different with your life.
Do you like debt?
I had that same.
Then this is the job for you.
I had that conversation with a friend of mine not too long ago. I'm actually going to direct her to this episode. And she worked at In-N-Out and was a manager for a very, very, very long time and was very, very good at it. And she just said that it after 15 years, it took a toll on her. And so she goes, I'm thinking about law and I wanted to get your advice. And I go, well, 50% of me says, yeah, it's a great business. Don't do family law unless like you're really going to dive in and embrace it and be prepared for the journey. And then the other part of me says, no, you can make a lot more money with a lot more stress at so many other jobs. But I think a lot of people would say that about their whatever job they're in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, law is, I think it's an acquired taste. And my parents ended up with 3 lawyers out of 4, which is crazy. And, I am hoping that one of them does it. So like you said, David, we can, pass the torch. But I think that we could tell our younger selves not to be such in a hurry to pick your future. Like, my advice, I've done the skincare. I've done the learn how to mute the haters and all that good stuff. But this one today is to travel. I would tell my younger self, wait for graduate school. I mean, I went straight from playing college soccer, literally 5 months later into law school, worked full time during the day, went to law school at night, to just rush through it all. And I think I'm the only kid in my family that hasn't been to Europe yet, which I will be heading there for soccer at some point in the near future.
Let's go to Europe.
But, it's like every one of my siblings has been there multiple times, backpack, and here I was the super studious child and the firstborn. And I look back and I'm like, what the, like, I did it wrong. I totally did it wrong.
CQ goes to Europe.
Yeah, I would love to go to Sweden. That's like kind of where the roots from both of my side of the family and my husband's side. There's just so many things that I haven't done that I want to do because I was so quick to get the career, get established. Everything was a timeline for me. Get the career, get established, wait, build my career, have kids, wait a few more years. And now I'm sitting here going 44 and I'm like, I'm burnt out. Like, I want to see the world. How can I see the world and do everything I want to do with CQ? So
yeah, my family's going to Australia for a month next month.
I heard they have a lot of big clubs there.
3 weeks in Brisbane. We'll be 1 week in Newport Beach, and then we're going to fly back to our home, and then
to your beach house
to Australia for 3 weeks.
Sweet, that's awesome.
Well, you know what my sister did? She did a year abroad in Australia, and then loved it so much she ended up staying for 3 years and finishing her undergraduate studies there. And I'm thinking, dude, my sister did it right. Like, and I think both of my brothers have probably, I think my youngest brother went backpacking for a year in between college and law school. And I think Taylor's been a few times. But yeah, I'm so excited you're doing that with your family. I would love to go for a month. I don't know that my anxiety or my boss would be totally cool with me being gone for a month. But
the boss, what are you talking about?
I do have to report to someone with respect to budgets and creativity, and he gives me a lot of wiggle room. But I definitely have to show where the profit's still going to be coming in.
There you go. All right. Well, I would tell. Thanks for asking, guys. I would tell my younger self that that I should just chill out because I will be awkward and have anxiety in 20 years. So it's chill. You don't have to worry about it. I was a little anxious kid, and I'm still anxious.
Well, you weren't little.
Well, yeah, I was 6 foot at 13, which probably played into all of my suitors at that age. Had a lot of boyfriends. Wink, wink. But yeah, I just say everyone should just chill out a little bit, and it's all going to be okay.
You're going to be awkwardly
You'll
uncomfortable,
be awkward.
regardless of what you do, what therapy you undertake, how much confidence you have. You're still going to be awkward. So just get used to it at 13.
Yeah,
I like that. That.
Anxiety is my superpower. That's why I'm such a hard worker.
Well, and it's funny because my daughter's 11, so she's playing girls. Her whole team is playing a year up in the top flight. So we're playing against girls that are 12 and probably almost 13. And it's so funny because she's a little nugget. And I always think, God, these girls are massive. Like, what are they eating in Newport Beach? Like, are they on creatine? Like, where can I get these growth hormones? Because Riley, literally, I took a picture. She went up to this girl's hip that she was defending. And then I laughed to myself because I said that would be Riley defending Sam.
Think about that. At 13, I was 6 foot, and everyone was like, when was your birthday? I was like always getting questioned about that, and I didn't understand. Like, why is everyone asking me this question? I'm here with my giant dad who's like almost 7 foot.
13 is such an interesting age for sports because different kids grow at different ages. So you get these lopsided competitions of these midgets against giants.
Right.
100%. Like, it's
flopping around with my size 11 feet, just awkward as can be.
And then with the size, you also have like the strength, right? Because a lot of the bigger girls or bigger, like whoever, they just have more control of their body. And Riley is very, very, very fast. That's her biggest strength. But when you get someone with 5'11" and their stride, it's crazy. Like, it's like Riley will be, 30 yards ahead on the sprint, and then these gazelles just come from behind. So it's good for them. I always say you're going to be small your whole life, and it is what it is. So you need to get creative and figure out ways to use your body and figure out different strengths. But I think of you now.
She'll be excited though when she's not a foot and a half taller than every guy she likes. Trust me.
Yes.
It'll square up eventually. All right, so enough blabber. David, let's get into QDROs. Can you explain to everyone what is a QDRO and why the heck this matters?
Yeah, so that's one of the number one questions I get. Why do I need you? After I just paid my family law attorney a bunch of money, why am I in your office? And, the reason my job exists is because there's so much red tape when it comes to retirement accounts. The way a military pension works is different than a federal pension, is different than a union pension, is different than a state pension versus from a county pension. And so this big body of law for division of retirement accounts, most family law attorneys don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, so they just throw it over to this little cottage industry of QDRO attorneys that handle all the red tape. And what I tell customers is essentially I'm just writing a check. I'm moving money from point A to point B, and that's the gist of it. But then there's all these other little nuanced things that you have to worry about. Remarriage, death, gains and losses in the stock market, cashing money out, loans, and so all these other little things that you just don't think about. The QDRO attorney's there to help guide you through these little red tape items so that you receive what you're entitled to under the law and you're protected in different scenarios.
And just to give everyone out there a little more context, when you're going through a divorce, a lot of times one of the most meaningful assets or a meaningful asset that needs to be divided is a retirement account. And how do you go about doing that? And it is sometimes an overlooked area of law if people try to go through the divorce process on their own without an attorney. Maybe they're giving up someone's retirement account and they don't realize that they have a community property interest in that account. And so it's really important for us to flag this issue to everyone that may be going through a divorce, that this is a really important asset and it needs to get divided in the correct way. And the way to do that is to have somebody who is an expert in the field do that. So although Kristen and I would never recommend going through a divorce case without an attorney, definitely 100% you need to divide your retirement accounts with an expert like David. There's only a few of them in the industry, and we want to make sure that everyone really knows who David Ruegg is, because he is the go-to and the name you need to know when you get to that point in your life that you're dividing assets. These could be assets that you really need to secure for yourself in your future so you can move on and be happy.
And David, here's the $1 million question. What does QDRO stand for?
Qualified Domestic Relations Order. It's an acronym that actually does not apply to all retirement accounts. So a federal pension is a COAP, court order acceptable for processing. A military is an MDO, a military division order. And there's other names out there that various plans like to call themselves, but the term QDRO seems to be, the term that everybody just in common speaking with each other uses for anything. So although the term is really only correct for private plans, it's basically used for all plans when you're discussing retirement plans.
So let me ask you this. Is there a time where you get creative with how you're dividing an account or how money is being moved?
Absolutely. I think the most common areas that you get creative is a buyout of spousal support or a buyout of a house, right? So if you really, really want to stay in your house, but you don't have the cash to buy out your former spouse, one of the things you can look to are the retirement assets. And if you have a proper valuation of what those are worth, you can horse trade and say, why don't you take the retirement accounts, I'll take the house, and if that's what both parties desire, then that deal can be made. And spousal support is one of those things that at least the person paying support is not thrilled to write a check every month. And so sometimes, what I tell my clients, what's the easiest way to get rid of your ex? You throw money at them and you can make them go away. And so oftentimes I will have customers that come into my office and say, I'd like to make a proposal that this annoying spousal support disappear. What if I throw in an extra 50 grand? And my ex says yes. And I say, well, if I got two adults in my office that agree with each other, who am I to say no? I'll put that together for you. And any judge is going to be pretty happy that they got two adults that agree with each other. They're going to rubber stamp that deal for the most part.
And that's such a great point that David brings up, because in family law, if parties don't come to an agreement, you're headed to trial. And California law is going to move forward. The court's going to make orders based on California family law. You're going to divide your assets, you're going to divide your retirement accounts, and all community property is going to be divided, for the most part, 50-50. However, right, most people don't want to go to trial. They don't want to spend the time to go to trial. They don't want to spend the cost of attorneys all the way through trial. And so often something that Kristen and I really quickly in a case start getting into is, hey, can we think of creative solutions? It's no secret that California has a very high housing market, and it's difficult for people to divide houses that maybe at the time they bought they can no longer afford. So being able to kind of pick out creative solutions is another way that we may want to use David in our cases to try to figure out these agreements that maybe the California judge is going to sign off on, but they wouldn't if you were at trial, because at trial, the regular rules apply. So I think it's a really important subject. My next question, and my burning question, because David promised me he was coming here with some good stuff for you guys, is have you had any crazy cases or any crazy things that have come up when you are dividing these accounts, David?
So I certainly have had my crazy clients that have legitimate mental health problems. There was one case.
No.
Well, I mean, there was one.
I'm being somewhat sarcastic, because I think that everybody in family law, including us attorneys, are slightly crazy on some level.
Yeah. So I had a client one time who, it was a very straightforward case. I was dividing his 401k. And he would send me these letters that some letters were capitalized, some letters were lowercase, like a serial killer, accusing me of working with Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama to go out, basically conspire against him. And I had called his old attorney and I said, do I need to be worried about this guy? And his old attorney said, he is the reason that I got the concealed carry permit and bought a gun. And I said, oh, that is very nice to know. And
Thank you for sending him to me.
Thank you. And this guy did not stop sending me letters. And finally, I called him up. I said, you know what? How about I just give you all your money back and you go somewhere else?
Yeah.
And so I apologized to his ex-wife, and I gave him his money back, and I didn't hear from him again. That was one that was a little bit maybe scary, and it was, around the time there were some shootings that were on in the news and stuff like that, so I was hypersensitive about family law attorneys and their personal safety. I don't know if you know this, but my wife used to work for the audience with Sam and Kristen, so you know.
Woo woo, we love Nikisha. Shout out to Nikisha.
Nikisha's the real star of this show. Woo woo! What's up, girl?
She had to lock herself in her office one time and call the police because a client wanted to go after her with a knife, and she had to push the client out of the door and lock it. So it was kind of around that time, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna give this guy his money back. Some of the sadder situations that I see are the people that come in and they waive their whole interest in the pension, right? Their ex-husband had bullied them during the marriage, continued to bully them after the marriage ended, and then the ex-husband comes in and says, my ex-wife's just going to sign off that she's going to get nothing. And in those scenarios, I will take the ex-husband's money, but then I'll talk with the ex-wife and say, are you sure you want to do this? You know, I mean, you don't have to do this. And a lot of times they'll still sign off, and I'm just kind of like, well, they are both adults, and I'm kind of like, I let them do it. So that's a sad one. One of the most interesting ones that I had was, I had an executive of a large clothing company, I'll just leave it at that he had some executive plans that were non-qualified that could not be divided based on the policies and procedures in the plan. And he was not happy when he heard this. And he said, I'll call you back, right? So he called his attorney for this large clothing company plan, had the plans changed for every single employee, including himself, and then he returned to me and said, well, it's now, you can divide it because I changed the rules of the company. And I was like, oh, you have the power to do that. Good to know.
Cool.
So,
that's a good one. No, and David, you bring up quite a few good points, and if anyone has any questions, they can call David, they can call Kristen, or they can call myself. But the thing is, when it comes to a retirement or a pension account, yeah, there are circumstances where maybe it's nominal in value and maybe you're willing to waive it for something else. Or like David was discussing earlier, maybe you're making some sort of trade for some similar type property. But proceed with caution. For the most part, you want your interest in that pension, right? And you want to at least know that you have a right to it and that you're meaningfully waiving it if you are. And unfortunately, kind of what David was sharing with us is something that I've seen happen quite a bit, where I get a client maybe after they've already signed the divorce papers and we're doing some sort of modification, and you're looking at it going, who signed this? So it's kind of a tip for everyone out there to make sure. Again, you should have an attorney, but if you don't have an attorney, at a bare minimum, you need that attorney to be reviewing that judgment, and you need some legal counsel associated with how you're dividing your assets, because once you waive stuff like that and you put it in writing and it's a judgment, there's no going back. There's very rarely circumstances where those can be set aside.
I'll give
a lot. Oh, go ahead, David.
I was going to give a hot tip too, that it's more common in my professional athlete cases, but the people are not aware of. There's a maneuver that I can do. I call it my Shawshank Redemption move, where it's kind of like, if you trust your wife, you can avoid some taxes, right? So what some of my professional athletes will commonly do, but it goes for anybody. It's just kind of, for whatever reason, it more frequently comes up with them, is if you're the account holder and you're under the age of 59 and a half and you want to pull money out of your 401k, typically what that's going to trigger are 3 taxes: ordinary income tax, a penalty to the federal government of 10%, and a penalty to the state of California of 2.5%. But if you agree to give the money to your ex-wife, if you're the husband and you're the account holder, and the ex-wife cashes it out, she'll pay income taxes on the money, but no penalties to the federal government, no penalties to the state of California, and then you can make a side agreement with her that she turns around and gives some of the money back to you. So I have done that maneuver to unlock money for both parties when there are divorce expenses, moving expenses, attorney expenses, and they need a financial reset. And so I've worked those details too. That's one that I didn't want to miss for this show, because that's one that a lot of people need.
That's huge.
Yeah, make sure that side agreement is in writing as well, you know, and have the attorney draft that. But one of the things, there's 2 things that I've wanted to reiterate from the show is, yes, as Sam brought up and David brought up, educate yourself and be transparent, like, with the whole process. If you don't know the answers, ask questions to your questions. A lot of people think they're saving money by not hiring an attorney in the initial stage of the divorce, and they're just going to do it on their own, or they're just going to use a paralegal, like a document prep. Those document preparation services are doing just that. They're prepping documents. They're not giving you legal advice. They are not licensed by the state to give you legal advice. And they're not telling you what you're giving up, what you're waiving, what you're benefiting from. And a lot of those same people will call me and say, Kristen, you're never going to believe it, but guess what happened to me? And I can say, Let me guess, you gave up your interest in this house, you had no clue what you were giving up in the pension, a lot of people are in the guilt phase when they're going through their divorce and they feel guilty for whatever reason and they want to make it right. So how do they make it right? They give up some monetary value, and it's oftentimes, say someone is unfaithful to their spouse and they have that guilt phase and they say, okay, I'll make it right. I will waive any interest in your retirement, or I will give you the house. Well, at some point that guilt phase is exhausted, and sometimes it's too late. So ask the questions, invest in the attorney on the onset if you have these issues. And second, QDROs are a big liability for most of us that are not experts in the field. So if someone calls me, I would never do a QDRO. None of the attorneys that work here would do a QDRO themselves. We send them to David because it's not our expertise, and I want you to get the best.
And as we learned from the beginning of the show, David is almost bored. He's so smart with dividing these accounts. So if you are going to trust someone that is so smart that this issue that's over all these family law practitioners' heads is just commonplace to David, who is looking for another hobby.
So in summary, for everyone listening, we will make sure we get all of David's contact information. David, how can they reach you, like the first place? Is it Instagram, TikTok, your phone number? What's the best place?
I think phone number and setting a no-fee initial consultation is a great start. My number is 951-523-7376, and my assistant Adriana can get you on calendar. My website is QDROdivision.com, QDROdivision.com. I do have some podcasts on my website where I answer common questions and various blog posts as resources out there to anybody who is looking to educate themselves.
Yeah, and we're going to give you all this information on the screen too, so when you go back and you watch this on YouTube, because we all look pretty cute today and we all have colors that make our eyes glow, but no, we actually give you all the information in writing and you can actually re-listen to it over and over if there's information that you missed. But I highly recommend going and watching David's podcast because it's a good starting place. I mean, I actually even go do it just to remind myself the basics of what I don't know with respect to doing QDROs and how important it is to refer it out to someone that is an expert in the area. And just like we have all of our old episodes for Custody Queens on Air on Custody Queens on Air and YouTube, you can go all the way back to our first episode, which was Meet the Queens, and you can all go all the way through, and we are well over 100 at this point. So there's everything from domestic violence to QDROs to how to interview attorneys and meeting all of the new queens as we've built our team. But as it was awesome this Saturday, and every Saturday, Sam and I and David had the best time with all of you, and we look forward to spending each and every upcoming Saturday with you. And if you have any questions regarding family law or QDROs, you can also give us a call at 1-800-419-7772. That is 1-800-419-7772. You can also follow us on Instagram and Custody Queens on Air for more information.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks for joining us today, David.
Thanks for having me. It was super fun.
And remember,
let love rule.